Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Only. Hello and welcome to Up Only TV. I'm Ledger. We got Cobie on the line, of course, and the founder of Mount Gox, Mark Karpelès. We're excited to have him. Let's just get straight to it. We got nothing else to do here. There's a little football on apparently, but forget that. We don't need them. The U.S. is going to win.
Competing with FIFA.
Yeah. Quidditch World Cup.
Yeah.
Cobie, how's it going?
Not bad, man. I bit my tongue a minute ago and I keep bleeding into my mouth. So I just need to pre-warn anyone that's watching in case just blood starts. I'm actually fine. I just
It'll make a good picture, like that scene from Fight Club. It's a very bear market grit type of scene. We need that. We need bloody toothed Cobie fighting through the bear market.
That's what it feels like right now. Anyway, Mark, thank you for joining us. I think you were the first sort of crypto personality, CEO that I ever sort of knew existed. Maybe competing with Big Vern, if you remember Big Vern from Crypty. I don't know which one of you I knew existed first, but so I've known about you for I guess 10 years or so now. So it's a little bit surreal to get to chat to you. For people that have joined crypto, I guess in the last 3, 4, 5 years, they might. It's strange, but they might not know even what Mount Gox was. They might not recognize you. Do you want to give the real TLDR version on what was Mount Gox, what happened at Mount Gox, and why it's relevant to the current FTX situation?
Yeah, actually, for Mount Gox, I think I'll go through a little bit of history because I joined the crypto community back in 2010. Back where there were only a few hundred people actually doing crypto stuff, and at the time I was running a hosting company which had some customers, and I had a customer who lived in Peru and asked me, hey, I've always had issues paying with my bank because I'm in Peru, it's a pain. I want to use Bitcoins on. It was the first time I heard about Bitcoins and actually joined the community back in 2010. At the time, there already was this Mount Gox exchange that was founded by McCaleb. I got involved. I found Bitcoin interesting, so I started accepting payments in Bitcoin. And I also got involved with the community. And I actually was approached by Jed at the time about helping with some issues they had. So my company in Japan started accepting payments for Mount Gox back then. And in early 2011, he asked me, do you want to take over Mount Gox? Are you willing to buy the company? I told him I didn't have the cash to buy it, and he just offered me, okay, do you want it? I can just give it to you, and there's some kind of agreement. And I ran with it because it sounded interesting. And it turned out to be a lot bigger than I was expecting, because when I took over Mount Gox, we had 3,000 customers. 3 months later, we had 60,000 customers. We had this article in, I think it was Times at the time, that published about Bitcoin and this new technology coming on. It was the very first mainstream press coverage of Bitcoin. Things got really crazy from there. It only took 2 more years to go from 60,000 customers to 1 million customers, which basically means that everyday operations were about trying to scale to the kind of customers coming in, and banks and regulators around the world didn't hear about Bitcoin until now because it was still very new. So we actually hit lots of issues going through this. And in 2014, we found out that Bitcoins were missing from the Mount Gox system. So we investigated into it, found that a lot of Bitcoin were missing, and were very strongly advised by lawyers to file for bankruptcy, which I did. So Mongox filed for bankruptcy on February 28th of 2014. We had about 1 million registered, a bit more than 1 million registered customers at the time, and about 10% had a balance on the exchange. And from then, the bankruptcy process started and is still ongoing to this day. So we're 8 years later, almost 9. We're finally seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, because very likely distributions will be happening next year. But we've had around 20,000 people who actually filed for claims. Most of the accounts were at the time either sold their claims or had very small balances that probably were worth like even a fraction of a cent or something like that, not worth going after. Distribution, as they are right now, we have a deadline in January for everyone to provide their banking information. So I'm guessing payment shouldn't be too long after that, because the longer it is, the more likely some people's bank account will have changed, and it's going to need to be done all over again. So I'm really hopeful to see a payment on this early next year.
When you say bank account, is that because the funds that are made up in this process have been converted to USD over time, or how's it paid through bank accounts versus through Bitcoin addresses?
Actually, the trustee asking people to provide either bank accounts or account with an exchange approved by the trustee, depending on the kind of balance the person has. Everything has been converted to Japanese yen for all the fiat currencies. But Bitcoins and Bitcoin Cash are available for distribution and will be distributed as such, unless people ask the trustee to get cash instead.
That makes sense.
And those Bitcoin that are being distributed, that was like a portion of what, like a portion of the balances that were left, right? So some is still stolen and lost. And like, I think hasn't moved in a long time. It's just sat on the one fees address, is it?
Yeah, actually, Mongox runs through a lot of events over time. The one fee address is actually 80,000 Bitcoins that were stolen from Mongox right before the transfer of Wright happened. So for that, actually, Jade contacted me and told me, like, there's this transaction and something happened. And when I looked into it, it looked like someone managed to get access to the Bitcoin daemon running the Mongox wallet and transfer funds out of it. But this is just one thing. The main largest event happened over time. Was actually quite insidious, I'd say, because it was small transfers done over the course of multiple years that were likely meant to not be easily seen. This is something that started around September of 2011, and because Mongox actually processed so many transfers, this didn't really stand out until much later. Like even after when we filed for bankruptcy and we knew that Bitcoins were missing, it took another 1 to 2 years before people investigating this, including very large channelization on similar companies that also joined the inquiry, before we found out that Bitcoins were actually stolen from the Mongox wallet using private keys that were taken from the original system made by Jed. And those private keys were used to just siphon little by little Bitcoins. We know at least of 500,000 Bitcoins stolen this way.
Oh my God.
The good thing is those Bitcoin went to a guy that is actually named Alexander Vinik, that was arrested in 2017 in Greece.
The BTCE guy?
Yes. So he was arrested. There was a kind of tug of war game between the US and Russia trying to pull the guy out of Greece. While they were fighting, at some point, France just came up and said, we want this guy too. And for Greece, it was much easier to just give him to France, that is also a European country. So he was actually judged in France for something else completely and spent a few years in jail in France. In the meantime, the war with Russia started, so there was no really any possibility for Russia to try to pull him out of Greece, prior to the US. So he was returned to Greece to then be flight back directly to the US. And right now he's detained in the US pending trial.
Wow, so he's been in custody for a very long time then. Well, I never even knew that. So they just had the private keys from the original Mt. Gox build that Jed put together, and they were just stealing coins. I mean, at the time, I remember all this stuff about transaction malleability and trying to learn what that was. So just them having the private keys, that makes more sense to me. So you filed for bankruptcy, I guess, 9 years ago in a couple of months' time, and you hope it'll wrap up within the year or so. So with regards to the FTX situation, who have filed for bankruptcy, I guess, a month ago, do you see this being another 10-year like stint before anyone can see a cent on the dollar?
Honestly, it's very hard to say. There are a lot of things that went through during the Mt. Gox bankruptcy that helped knowing things, basically how it would happen, should help new bankruptcies going much faster. But at the same time, FTX has a very complex legal structures. Mt. Gox you had Mt. Gox, you had Mt. Gox Poland, you had the US company, you also had a company in Ireland where we're trying to get a license, and also in Taiwan. But it was much more limited in terms of scale, and each company had a very specific purpose, while FTX has this whole 130-something companies all across the world, with many companies in Antigua, Seychelles, or different kind of places that are typically known as tax havens or not being very cooperative with the US. The bankruptcy has been filed for every single company in the US in Delaware, but for most countries, filing for bankruptcy in a foreign country is not going to count because it's not the same laws. The company actually filed for bankruptcy protection, which is Chapter 11. It's a US law, but it's only basically having force inside the US. So, for example, for the Bahamas company, there also was a bankruptcy filing inside Bahamas, and they've also filed for Chapter 15 in the US, which is recognition of foreign bankruptcy proceeding, which is typically the correct way to do that. But at the same time, you cannot just file at the same time 130 bankruptcies in so many countries accurately.
So the goal when you're doing that is to say you file for bankruptcy when whatever jurisdiction is required, and then you try to file some kind of motion or something to essentially allow one jurisdiction to acknowledge the bankruptcy process in another jurisdiction so that you can consolidate your efforts, I guess.
Well, basically the goal for bankruptcy protection is to protect the company's assets against lawsuits. So when, like FTX, everything is going bad, you file for bankruptcy protection, you reorganize the company so it can run again and make profits, or you just liquidate everything and you distribute all the assets equally to every single creditor. So the goal really is to protect the assets of the company. So typically you will want to file the bankruptcy where the company has assets, which would be at least the country where the company is incorporated. So, for example, the US is a very big place and it's very well known for lawsuits. So most companies filing for bankruptcy, for example, in Japan, we also want to file for bankruptcy recognition in the US to stop lawsuits in the US from taking assets indirectly if there's anything that could be taken from the US. But a company, for example, that is incorporated in Antigua, and I believe FTX trading on Alameda accounts are inside Antigua, because from the deposit information that was posted by some customers on Twitter, actually the account is in Antigua. So filing for bankruptcy protection inside Antigua is probably a very big priority, unless those funds were moved somewhere else.
A clip came out of, I think, about half an hour ago of Sam, who sounds like he's on the beach on the phone talking to some non-journalist called Tiffany, and he said that he felt like he was forced into filing for bankruptcy by lawyers. He wishes he hadn't done it, and he says that 8 minutes after he filed for bankruptcy, $4 billion of liquidity was offered to him by someone who knows, might be a lie. Maybe he's delusional. Who knows? But did you ever feel like pressured into the bankruptcy by lawyers? Was it the correct path? Was it the only path that you had available? And how did that go down for you? And how has Sam done the right thing by filing for bankruptcy?
Well, honestly, seeing how long it's taking with the bankruptcy to go through everything, I did question this choice quite a few times. Back in the day, the lawyers from Gox did pressure me and were very clear in that the situation at that point, the only option was to file for bankruptcy, as not filing for bankruptcy would mean that we had impending lawsuits that would start to be chipping away funds from the company, which would mean that some creditors would get some money back, and whoever filed for lawsuits for first were more likely to get back money. So in a purely legal way of thinking, the bankruptcy makes sense. When you run a company, of course, you don't want it to end on. That's very normal to doubt, did I make the right decision at the time? But it turns out the bankruptcy helps a lot in protecting against lawsuits. I mean, it's made for it, so of course it helps. We've seen some exchanges that lost a lot of money, just issue tokens, kind of managed to get back on track. Many of these actually were in jurisdictions that were kind of difficult to access. So you wouldn't know exactly who to sue, and anyway, if most people were happy with it, you could run with it, and it turns out that the largest creditors and people who actually tried to sue or didn't actually sue, but just say they would be suing to get their money back. If you just pay back those people, typically you can move forward with a kind of plan, not using bankruptcy, but it's not exactly fair to everyone because some people are getting more assets and so on. And it sounds like Sam has been doing something similar by reopening withdrawals for people inside the Bahamas, because they are the more likely to sue and actually get something back. Because when you sue someone, you can ask the court to seize their assets if you believe they might not be able to pay later or try to run away. So that's typically the kind of things people do. But that's also why we have bankruptcy protection on this whole process. The other thing is about this incoming money. I think it was something like he mentioned $4 billion or something like that. I doubt very much that whoever was really ready to put $4 billion would be still putting this kind of money, knowing how FTX was actually run. It takes a special kind of management to have the guy who went through Aaron, John Ray, who is in charge of FTX, say that this is the worst case of his career.
Yeah. Yeah, he's probably seen a decent amount of bad stuff. And yeah, it seems to me like there's got to be a blend of Sam trying to provide some form of verbal cover for his own future liability, or like criminal or civil liability, either one, where incompetence or some other non-criminal intent type of behavior would be seen favorably. Like if he's just stupid or delusional or negligent, that's all better than if he's like a criminal mastermind in terms of his personal liability. And so it's hard to balance. Is he saying what he's saying or doing what he's doing because he's trying to set himself up for that? Or is he still like on some kind of hangover where he's not faced reality and he thinks he's telling the truth? That's a difficult balance.
I mean, it looks like he's trying to freestyle something in that direction. Typically, when you are in this kind of situation, you need to hire communication experts, supposing you have enough money to do that. That will get you interviews with people that actually will write whatever you want them to write. And you never just publish whatever you say directly. You always go through a review process to make sure that whatever is said is not going to create extra liability. And for example, trying to deny there was any kind of backdoor might work with some people asking questions, but there was definitely something considering all the discussion there is around it. I do think Sam knows something, just not trying to say, yeah, I didn't do it, it's not me, I didn't know about it. It's just the same thing with hidden cash account worth $8 billion. When you have a company, and typically, I mean, they did go through some kind of audit. I don't know how trustworthy the auditing company based in the metaverse is or not. Same thing from what we see in the filing by John Ray. He doesn't believe it at all. This $8 billion account in the company's accounting should have raised questions during the audit. It's something we don't know about right now that clearly need clarification.
That was an element where it was a little confusing because there were different auditors for different entities, and the U.S. side of things seemed better shape and was operating normally even when the .com side had already shut off. And the auditors for those entities were also different. The metaverse auditor was one that was of questionable, quality, and the U.S. auditor was one that the bankruptcy organizer John Ray said he had heard of, was thorough, whatever. And it seems like, at least from my point of view, there may have been some kind of key man control that still existed, but otherwise the US side was operating as a different exchange until you hit this point where all the money left at once and went into the same bucket. What complications could have been created by that last effort, especially if it was organized by Sam?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of questions around this. How much cryptocurrencies each company has and so on, and it looks like it's all put together. I'm guessing the cryptocurrencies were held inside a wallet in Bahamas, which means that typically Bahamas regulators could claim that this belongs to the Bahamas company in terms of location. Some of the companies, like for example FTX in Japan, actually Japanese regulators have very strong requirements for cryptocurrencies and assets to be held inside Japan and separately from the company's assets. So there was a publication by FTX Japan actually showing that they've got all the assets ready for distribution to customers and there's nothing lost. I'm guessing in the US regulators also have higher requirements, for example, in terms of accounting on auditing company, which would mean that the metaverse auditing company maybe didn't make the cut in terms of requirements.
Wait, it was a metaverse auditing company?
Yeah, I'll have to look at the name.
I completely forgot the name, but it really stands out that it's based in the metaverse because I think the only thing people will remember about it.
Yeah, and John.
Oh my god.
And he like threw some serious shade at it as well in his day one filing. Can you tell us about the day one filing? Like, what is that actually? What's the importance of that, and what they're saying there?
Well, there's actually quite a lot of important pieces in it. Basically, the way it looks like things were done until now, you have this FTX International, FTX US, 130 companies around the world, and accounting is done, I guess, through Slack. You know how you can create custom emoticons in Slack to create reactions? So I would guess you would have a custom emoticon for approved and one for denied. Which, I mean, some Japanese companies running Slack also have use a lot of custom emoticons with Japanese words. commonly used to make Slack feel more at home. And there's also some discussions about the automatically disappearing messages and so on. But one thing Mongox had actually is because Mongox was in Japan, Japan tends to be very paper-based. So like if you want to send a wire through one of the banks we're using, we had to write a wire request on paper, fill a form, put a stamp on it, and then bring it to the bank, which means we always had some kind of paper trail remaining. Mongox did also have an accountant full-time on board, which FTX didn't have while being like a $30 billion company, which makes no sense to me. You want to have someone inside the company full-time looking at your accounts.
Yeah. There's been a little bit of sentiment about, this John Enron liquidator guy. He's built his, huge reputation, and now this is his sort of whale-sized meal to live on for him and his buddies for the rest of his career. It's like it's typical in these things that some people place anger in different places. So whether he's catching those as strays, who knows? I want to ask: is any of that fear, in your opinion, justified? Do you see people circling like vultures on these bankruptcies, just trying to take salaries or take whatever out for themselves out of the whatever remains for customers, or is it not something to worry about?
Well, people are bound to try to come and get whatever they can get. You have kind of a pot of gold. The company was maybe $100 million in assets. That's basically without management, and it turns out everything is a mess. In order to kind of clean up everything, you need people. And while John Ray he's getting a very good pay on this, but at the same time, he's also getting a very large piece of work, and a very large also exposure with a lot of people seeing his name. Whatever happened with his bankruptcy is going to reflect on him. And it's not just about getting everything right and clearing up all the accounting. It's also about having his name put out there, going through filing. You have this huge mess and you need to get something out of it. So it makes sense that he would get some kind of payment for it. So typically the kind of amounts he would be getting would have to be approved by the court, I believe, and people are able to challenge it. Creditors can most likely file with the court and say why did this money was spent, what is it going for, and so on. But it's very likely going to cost a lot of money to go through everything and clean up all the accounting. So that's something people waiting for funds from FTX need to get ready. Is whoever you put on top of this either is going to do a bad job, things are going to get messy, or likely going to cost a lot more, but do a proper job and hopefully get resolution not so far in the future. So I don't know exactly how long it's going to take for this FTX bankruptcy to go on. It's not going to be forever. Typically, most of the costs will come at the beginning because you don't know anything about how the companies are formed. You don't know where the accounting is. It looks like you don't even know who are employees of the company. And once you've got everything put together and so on, you don't need as many people to go through records and so on, and the company can start operating more like a company.
Yeah. The other thing I want to ask a little bit about is when these situations happen, you have all these sort of unusual ties that look a little bit like corruption. So there was we're allowing withdrawals only to Bahamian citizens thing, and then there was the Bahamas have actually asked Sam to send all of the assets to their wallet, which is like, who knows, maybe that's fine and normal. Then there's the Sam donating, hundreds of millions of dollars to Democrats and Republicans in the US and cozying up to like directly to the regulators themselves. Who knows what else? Who knows like how these things go behind the scenes? And then I remember, and I know it was a long time ago, and I did no research, as is classic for me. But I remember in the Mt. Gox days, there were the corrupt DEA agents who were stealing Bitcoin from Silk Road and trying to cash out through Mt. Gox around the same time as all these events unfolding. How do you think corruption in the systemic powers of these countries play out in situations like this, and why do they seem so frequent? And what actually happened with those DEA agents? Are they in jail now or what?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, money is going to corrupt people. It's very well known. You've got money, you're going to get corruption. Cryptocurrencies are kind of money that's anonymous and that's very well suited for corruption. You've got those large companies like FTX crawling around with millions and millions of dollars. So of course you're going to have a lot of people that may be going to approach FTX and offer their help for some kind of money. Or you're going to have people who have like this Karl Marx Force, I believe was the name, the DEA agent. Actually, I think one was the DEA agent, one was a special service guy who stole money from Silk Road and were looking for ways to cash out those Bitcoins without getting caught. So they thought that using Mt. Gox and then just destroying Mt. Gox would be enough to hide all the evidence. So as I see it anyways, the main reason why they tried to get Mt. Gox out of the picture was to make sure that whatever transfer they did would disappear. Bad luck for them, because actually in Japan we have paper accounting and a lot of things that means that evidence is always going to remain. They were arrested, evidence was used. They didn't go to trial, they just agreed to plead guilty and get reduced sentence and stuff like this. So like many criminal cases in the US, those don't go up to a jury trial and so on. Things are much earlier, because when you're guilty, you know you're guilty. You just say, okay, I'm guilty. Let's get things done and move on with it. Because, I mean, it's just going to cost a lot more money, time, and nobody's enjoying all of this. So might I always get done with it. Yeah. That's also one reason why so many cases in criminal justice in the US go with people pleading guilty, even sometimes when they're not actually guilty, because you can spend 10 years fighting something and then 10 years in jail, or you can just plead guilty, do 1 year of jail and be done with it.
Yeah. By the way, I pulled up the initial docket. So we got some gems in here. This is the WRS Silo is the name for the FTX US side. So what he says, the audit firm for the WRS Silo, Armamino LLP, was a firm with which I am professionally familiar. The audit firm for the .com silo was Prager Metis, a firm with which I am not familiar, and whose website indicates that they are the first ever CPA firm to officially open its metaverse headquarters in the metaverse platform Decentraland. So that's part of that initial docket. It also says stuff in here like, they effective cash management requires liquidity forecasting, which I understand was also generally absent from the FTX group historically. So it's just like over and over again talking about how everything was a dumpster fire there. And then one other clarification that I was going to try to find, I don't know if it's in this document or another. I believe that John Ray is actually, I say only, but in lawyer terms, it's kind of an only charging like $1,200 an hour, something like that. Which
I think I read a little bit more, but
yeah, I think for the initial stuff. I don't know what their like longer term contract is, but yeah, it's his documentation so far has been highly critical at a bare minimum in terms of FTX's practices.
Yeah, as I see from all the filing and so on, it's also been very productive. So things have been moving fairly quickly, considered the size of the companies, the number of involved parties and companies. So actually, I'm a little bit impressed by the kind of speed it's going with. I'm worried at the same time because Sam has been mentioning that he wants to do battle between the Bahamas and US on who has jurisdiction on this. I don't know exactly how it's going to go, but it looks like the Bahamas are going on with it. The potential seizure of cryptocurrencies and so on might make the US bankruptcy more difficult. People who file with the US bankruptcy may not get as many assets as people who file with the Bahamas bankruptcy. We don't know exactly how it's going to go. Honestly, I didn't have much doubt about Bahamas as a country until they aired this Attorney General announcement about the FTX situation and how Bahamas can be trusted to regulate all of this and so on. And the more someone is trying to say you can trust us, the less I trust it.
Yeah. In terms of trying to visualize this for people, they broke it into 4 major silos, and then there's all of these entities within each one. And
if you look at the Exhibit B, actually a little bit lower than that, you have more detailed view of it with all the single companies and the country for each company written below the name.
Yeah, it's not letting me scroll well. I'm going to have to fix it.
Yeah. If you want, I have you can look at my Twitter account. I've got this file standalone. I actually exported this page only, so it's easier to read. Or maybe I can send you a link.
Yeah, I can get it. I just I got to wrangle it a little bit, but it's much more complicated if you look through this, and there's a lot going on. So this is what they have to navigate as they're trying to figure out which of these entities hold which assets, what liabilities do they have, what creditors does each one have. And I guess what I would like to know, if you just had to take a shot at it, how long you think this will take? A year before they get to anything truly productive in the sense of start liquidating assets or like taking action? Like, what's the curation phase length that people should expect?
That's actually a good question. There's 2 sides of it, and one of the main things is that right now FTX in the US has filed for Chapter 11, which means that before trying to just liquidate everything, maybe some parts of this can be sold. I mean, you have an exchange in the US with a proper license. You have an exchange in Japan with not only a proper license, but also assets. So it could be sold. The money from the sale could be used to repay creditors. So it's not just a matter of just taking everything, selling every single building or everything, but trying to find what can be sold at a higher value, because if you just close the company and sell the building, you might not get as much as selling it as a set with its employees, computers, and so on, provided it's managed correctly. So it's going to be first a job of trying to go through everything and create a proper list of all the assets and the situation for every single company in this graph. So basically, you want to know, is this company solvent or not? Does it have any kind of assets that are of value? And does the company, as a company, has a kind of resale value? And if it has resale value, you need to find a buyer for it. It looks like John Ray has some connection with some investment banks and some things like that may be willing to put money to buy some of those assets. And for anything that doesn't have any kind of value, you need to actually get rid of it. And sometimes it may mean paying money to actually recycle computers or whatever is there, and pay legal fees to close the companies and so on. So it's a very long process, and the complexity of the whole structure is not going to help at all. So if there's any kind of branch out of this, like for example, the West Rimshire thing you're highlighting right now is like a whole bunch of 10 companies and a few more below it. If you can find someone who want to buy this whole thing as a lot, it might make sense because you don't have to worry about anything inside it anymore. You have money for it, but you need to make sure that the money you sell it for is actually a fair value. The court is going to look into it. John Ray cannot just try to find a friend and tell it, okay, I'm going to use this for cheap and give me some cash back and stuff like that. It's going to be actually reviewed by the court, and everything will be on the record. So there shouldn't be any kind of funny business there.
So it's not super easy for someone to just come in, swoop in, offer a super cheap price for a component of this and it not go through proper due diligence, because at this point, anything that can carry value, their job is to extract as much value as it can for the parent.
One way this is typically done is by taking whatever has value, making sure it's clean, and then putting them up for auction. So you will have anyone can join the auction, and the highest bidder gets the thing anyway. But you often see like bankruptcy auctions. So quite often bankruptcy auctions tend to go as much cheaper price than regular auctions because there's typically some kind of hidden defect or things that may be there and you cannot contact. You don't have any kind of post-purchase support. So you buy something, you do whatever you can with it. But it's also the fairest way to get a good value for the kind of assets, because it means you're not just selling like a company to someone undercovers and come afterward and say, okay, we got this much cash. You're going to go with, okay, we have this number of assets. We made lots for each company that may have some value, publish documentation and announce like next month we're going to do an auction for all of those companies. If you want to participate in the auction, you need to register. People who have registered will be able to bid on the different pieces and make sure that FTX as a bankruptcy estate gets the most value out of it.
I saw that you tweeted to SBF earlier today saying, if you're taking calls, I'd love to talk to you, even off the record, to clarify a few things. Like this cash count everyone's talking about without knowing what it is exactly. I know what it's like running an exchange and being pressured into bankruptcy by lawyers. And having, I guess, 8-9 years to reflect on what what played out and having been through, I guess, some of what he's going through now once, what should he be doing now that he might not be doing? Like, what do you want to tell him, basically?
Typically, the one thing you want to do in this kind of case is to be quiet, to the right kind. I mean, I don't want to use, I could use a different way of saying this, but typically anything you say can and will be used against you. So
he's not being quiet, really.
He's not being quiet. He's making a lot of things worse. Like, for example, this story about, no, I'm not only giving money to Democrats, I also give to Republicans.
But we hit it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds weird. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Republicans have a way to accept what he called dark cash. Because, I mean, many times Republicans tend to be more, having more complex opinions on things. But if it's true, it's making him look worse. So I don't know why he's talking about this. The same thing for different things he talked into this 20 minutes call, which I actually listened to before we got on the chat here. So I saw a little bit of it. I don't know why he is saying all of these kind of things, but he will find very likely after some time that maybe it would have been better to not say anything.
And you mean just like his personal circumstance outcome, like he's like much more likely to go to jail, or you mean for the outcome for like FTX users and creditors?
I mean, for everything, and lawyers are telling him to stay quiet and not talk to the press and so on. And there's a very good reason for that is when you have a very complex case like this one, the way things will turn out depend on a lot of factors. And sometimes something that often actually quite a lot in corporate law is that you set things after the fact, like you have a transaction and afterward, okay, this was a loan, or actually you have some money to pay it back, so you make it zero and so on. So quite often you have this kind of process which are not ideal, but are part of the reality of running a large business, is that transaction need to go quickly, but you don't know yet how you're going to put it on the books as a loan, as a payment. Are you going to issue an invoice for it, or are you going to do a loan contract, and so on? And it's the same thing for this, is whatever he says, he cannot take back afterward. So it's going to stay in stone. Things like, for example, this mysterious cash account that has been kind of mentioned a few times. The more he talks about it, the less, for example, if he goes, I mean, if somehow he ends in a criminal court and needs to defend himself, he won't be able to say, like, yes, this was, for example, a loan by Alameda, that because we didn't have a bank account, we made transfers to this, and it's actually on the books at this, but it's a loan, it's like this, we know about this. Because criminal law is all about intent. And if you talk about your intent, you're just blocking ways, and you could defend yourself afterward.
Listen, if he keeps blabbing and makes things worse for himself, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with
Yeah, Sam, if you are listening and you'd like to blab about yourself on this show, we can have a live therapy session with you and Mark.
And that's exactly why I offered to call with him, because a lot of things actually need to be clarified. It may not be for the best for him on the long term to clarify lots of things, but if he's willing to, I'm happy to ask very specific questions on what this cash account is, or what this backdoor is, because he claims he doesn't know about it. I mean, he claims actually he didn't code it, but he cannot not know about it. It was in the press for some time. He definitely looked into it, but he's not willing to talk about it. So there probably need to be more specific questions asked to make sure of what this is about.
Yeah. When you first heard about the FTX insolvency, I guess, did you have like a PTSD flashbacky type episode, or were you shocked? Did you think, it's like been almost 10 years and crypto's sort of still in, like, we're just repeating the same stuff that we do? We've already done this once. We've done this a few times, actually. Do we need to be doing this again? Do you think the industry should have matured beyond this by now? Maybe I'm even asking, like, do you do much crypto stuff at all anymore? And what's your opinion on how the industry has evolved over the last 10 years?
Yeah, actually, there's quite a few interesting things there to say. I didn't get any kind of PTSD, and I was not shocked, nor was I surprised. I mean, I was expecting this kind of thing to happen, because when we had the Gox bankruptcy, a lot of exchanges are starting to do some proof of reserve and proof of liabilities, which were done quite nicely, actually. One of the first exchanges to go on with that was Kraken, where they published a list of all their assets, and they used a list of all the liabilities. That was a JSON file where you had the hash of every single account of Kraken user on the balance. And you could very easily check if you were on this list, because you just hash your account ID, you see if you're there. It means that Kraken couldn't really lie about anything, because if anyone was not on the list of the liabilities, it meant there was something wrong. So it was actually a very nice process. At the time, it broke a little bit of the privacy you get from using a centralized exchange, but it made it impossible for the exchange to cheat on this. This actually went on. It was updated weekly for some time, and then it was updated monthly, and then it was not updated anymore. I think about 6 months later, they just removed it because nobody was looking at it anyway. So things went back to how they were before Mongox, with exchanges being opaque and people just trusting everything blindly. And I think actually people are a little bit, could have done something to prevent this, because when exchanges put the actual effort to go through all this process, and actually it takes time and resources to generate audits of every single liabilities and assets. And just people didn't care. So when you're an exchange and you try to fight with other exchanges and who's going to get the most sales and so on, it's a competition. So doing something that nobody looks at is basically spending resources for nothing. It makes sense that exchanges will stop doing it if nobody cared about it. And it's bad. And the thing is, right now we're going through the same kind of thing. Binance says they're going to do proof of reserves. Some exchanges are also moving with that, but it's very likely that a few months from now, nobody will care about it anymore, and we'll get back to the previous situation. And it's something I want to change, and that's why actually, don't know if you've seen talk a little bit about it before in the press and so on. But I've created a company called Ungox, which goal is to audit and review exchanges, crypto businesses, and so on, to see who is actually legit or not, and giving a risk score to every single exchange and project out there. So the idea, I guess, is for most people looking through audit report by Kraken or another exchange and trying to find the account ID, do the hash thing, and so on is a pain. But if they can just go to a third party and confirm everything's fine, and Ungox can check with Kraken and every single exchange regularly to get audit information and updates information, it might actually be more long-lived than the original process.
When you say you haven't been surprised seeing these things happening 10 years later, is it because you expect that level of greed, that level of incompetence, or is it like some result of rapid growth that just gets away from people during good times, and then they get stuck in some kind of hole? What do you attribute it to?
Well, actually, it's a little bit of everything. Following Mongox and seeing how things went back to how they were before, it was only a matter of time before we had one very large exchange messing up. And it could have been greed from the owners. It could have been a lack of security that caused Bitcoins to be stolen, or it could have been a lot of things. The only thing that kind of surprised me that it took so long for this to happen. Because when we talked about this, Mongox, I actually published an article back in 2015 telling basically didn't really understand about this. I kind of tried to make my mission in life to find a way to make sure we don't get a second Mongox. It's not easy because while the bankruptcy is still ongoing, I have a lot of block on this point. Like, people don't want to hear me talking about how we can protect from doing another Mongox until they actually get their money. So I was planning on opening Ungox after the actual payment is made, or at least when it was announced. We had a specific date for it. Turned out that the FTX bankruptcy happened before that. I was hoping Mongox distribution last year, so we could have actually been up by then. FTX and some companies out there actually did display or are displaying some symptoms or signs that things are not going as they should. So for FTX, actually, it was quite obvious on various points. You had people talking about how FTX was trying, for example, to get loans with they were ready to pay like 50% a year or something like that. Very high kind of rates that shouldn't be needed for FTX to raise money. I mean, if you have people just willing to invest $4 billion or large amounts of money like that, you don't try to get a 15% loan. A lot of things like this that happen. The fact that there was no senior management in FTX, we didn't have anyone with very long experience running companies, and the kind of complexities you run into when you run exchange, actually, typically you need to have some people at least that are knowledgeable in running large companies, and especially if your company is worth tens of billions of dollars. And there's many little things like that that add up together. And the fact that the exchange was issuing its own FTT token too is typically a little bit of a, I mean, it's not a red flag by itself alone, but it's something you need to watch. And it can be a bad sign depending on how it's issued, how it's audited, and so on. So there's a lot of little things that add up together into kind of warning signs. And some people have been voicing on Twitter that they saw it, they knew FTX was going to go bankrupt, and they were talking about like 4 months ago. But the problem is most people who deal with FTX directly are not going to read every single person on Twitter and try to see what kind of arguments are truthful or not. Is it just some food, or is it real? That's something I want to do with Gox, is to actually investigate these kind of claims and provide information based on verifiable evidence.
And how do you feel about this sort of like DeFi, decentralized finance, non-custodial attempts at rebuilding, centralized experiences, I guess? So like you have your Uniswaps, but you also have like GMX and like decentralized perps exchanges now. I don't know how decentralized these things actually are, so I use like DeFi and scare quotes or whatever. But do you think that there's any merit to this sort of last few years of people building these kind of things, or do you think it's kind of nonsense?
Well, actually, I do like technology, and I like a lot of things going on in this sector. Trying to improve the ability for people to not rely on a single entity and interact only with systems that are smart contracts or on the blockchain audited is a good thing. But the problem is it's still a lot more complex to go through. So you're not going to do a Super Bowl about a DeFi exchange, because the kind of people that watch the Super Bowl may not be able to go through all the steps you need to actually get on a DeFi exchange. Also, people, I believe, need to be more careful about some part of the centralized things that you interact with in DeFi. Because no matter if you have a DeFi contract, if someone behind still has the, for example, ownership rights and is able to update it, you have to trust that person. If you use a stablecoin, typically it means that stablecoin is issued by a company you need to trust. Just saying, yes, I'm trading on a DeFi exchange, I'm 100% safe. If you're using a stablecoin, you're not decentralized. So you may get your assets, could still go into very bad things. The other thing is, even if you're trading on a DeFi exchange and you're fully separate from anything centralized, you will still be impacted by a very large centralized exchange going down, because it's going to push the price down and so on. So your project may go, the market may lose value and so on. And that's just the reality of things right now.
Did you have confidence that the Bitcoin market would recover after Mt. Gox? Because I got a little bit, it was my first like real major market crash, and I remember the time quite well because there was the Roger Ver video where it looked like you had him at gunpoint, and he was reading the thing like, Mt. Gox is solvent. And then Charlie Shrem as well was also like talking on Reddit about these things, and then the crash just seemed like relentless to me. I think Bitcoin, was it like $89 or something, like $100 or something at the bottom. Did you have confidence that that Bitcoin in the industry would survive Mt. Gox, or did you think that you'd potentially taken down this like budding new industry?
Well, the different thing I need to say with this first would be that I'm very sorry to Roger and everyone that supported Mt. Gox at the time and ended taking shit for it, because at the time, even I didn't know about all the problem we had and the fact that we are missing so many Bitcoins. I knew at the time, I believed I knew at least that we were okay. We are fighting with this Silk Road lawsuit in the US. The US has seized $5 million from us, and we were getting very close to solve it, actually. And the fact that US agents initiated this and tried to take down Mt. Gox allowed us to get a good kind of process with you that would have allowed us to get more assets back that you typically get when the government returns seize funds. So we were very close to solving this situation when we found out that the missing Bitcoins, and it turned out everything we fought for was kind of all for naught. I'm sorry for all the people that I tried to help and ended taking a lot of shit of this. But basically what happened after the failure of Mt. Gox, it was kind of similar to the Bitcoin winter of 2012, where we had many, many months of the price around $3 to $5, not going up, and nothing happening for months on. And it's, I believe, some part of what happening with Bitcoin is the price and the market activity depends on the kind of news and how people are hopeful about Bitcoin. And seeing a large exchange going down is always going to bring people down. But it's only temporary, because we're going to see new things happening again. Bitcoin is going to go up again. Crypto is going to get back. A lot of things on, I believe, actually, with FTX, the impact is much lower than for Mt. Gox. But even for Mt. Gox, when Mt. Gox crashed, we already started to see some larger exchanges. You had Coinbase. In Japan, you also had Bitflyer. I mean, different exchanges started to be stable around the world. If Mt. Gox crashed during 2012, for example, it would have been much, much worse, as there were no other exchange out there. There would have been any way to buy and sell this Bitcoin anymore except for the OTC channel.
There was, I was new in 2017, so I had heard of Bitcoin, and I heard of when Mt. Gox crashed on the news, and I was like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Just as a general skeptic at the time, and then found out about the program. Wow, I can't talk today, Cobie. Not just today. The programmatic capabilities of Ethereum and all that, and kind of went all in 2017 and learned about Bitcoin over time. And then in the bear market, there were all these rumors of the Mt. Gox creditor like panic dumping Bitcoin at various times. What was the process for like when they sold coins, why they sold coins, which coins they kept, and like what was the strategy there? Were they trying to maximize value? Were they trying to produce funds for like certain milestones in the bankruptcy process? What the heck was actually happening there that you're aware of?
Well, actually, there's a very good reason why Mt. Gox sold about 50,000 Bitcoins back in 2017, I believe. Is initially when Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy in 2014, we actually filed for the equivalent of Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, which in Japan is called civil rehabilitation, with the goal of trying to either reorganize the company or see what can be done to get the company back afloat. At that point, there was a lot of pressure from creditors for Mt. Gox to go into a liquidation bankruptcy, which would be Chapter 7 bankruptcy in the US, where the trustee just sells everything and distributes everything to the creditors. I believe a few months later, so in April or May of 2014, Mt. Gox went to liquidation bankruptcy, which means we just sell everything and then we distribute everything. It's much simpler. Creditors get paid sooner and everyone's happy. Except there was this US company named CoinLab that tried to file, they did file a lawsuit in the US against Mt. Gox initially and tried to get money out of it, asking some insane amount of money from Mt. Gox and holding on everything and basically blocking the process because they filed for an amount that's so large that they would be the only person basically getting money out of the bankruptcy if they are right. And for the bankruptcy, the problem is if you don't know, I mean, you cannot say for sure. I mean, I can say for sure, I know that this lawsuit, based on, of course, my knowledge and being involved with this, is without merit. But the trustee cannot just act on this information because the trustee needs to work with the court and investigate everything. So it delayed the bankruptcy quite a few years. And by the time this kind of moved forward, the price of Bitcoin went up again. Suddenly, Mt. Gox was not in bankruptcy anymore because the assets Mt. Gox held, which were 200,000 Bitcoin at the time, were worth more than the liabilities under the bankruptcy process. So typically in 2014, in end of February, when Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy, every single customer's liabilities were calculated in Japanese yen. So it was 1 Bitcoin equal 50,000 yen, give or take. That was the base for the bankruptcy. When the assets were worth more than that, what typically happens in the bankruptcy is whatever remains after everything is distributed goes to the shareholders, which would be me and Jed. That would have been quite a headache, actually, for me and for everyone involved. Of course, it would also been bad for creditors because they could have been getting more money and they wouldn't be getting more money. I tried to make sure people knew about it at the time. I did talk with quite a few creditors about what could be done. I talked to lawyers too. One of the solutions that was brought up by lawyers is to bring back Mt. Gox from liquidation bankruptcy to civil rehabilitation so that Mt. Gox can distribute its assets as Bitcoins. So that would mean I wouldn't get anything, but quite frankly, I didn't expect to get anything from the beginning. So getting like $1 billion and having 100,000 people hating me sounds like a bad deal. I'd rather not get any money. So I
Cobie, bad deal, good deal.
I'm going to say, Ledger, which way are you going?
I mean, make it at least 1 trillion, maybe I'll think about it, but 1 billion, it's nothing near enough.
So just so I understand correctly, the liability that customers had pegged to 1 Bitcoin to 50,000 Japanese yen would have been covered by only a percentage of the Bitcoin because Bitcoin's price went up so high, and all of the remaining Bitcoin would have been yours, which was over $1 billion. So you fought to give back all this Bitcoin to customers, basically.
Yeah, there was some limits on what I could do because I don't directly have a standing inside the bankruptcy. I'm just the director of a failed company, which limits what I can do. But the one thing I could do is to make sure creators knew about it. So I would go to people, I would be on Reddit and explain, yes, as things are right now, I'm about to be due to receive $1 billion. So people, what would you distribute this $1 billion to creators? I say, I mean, I would want to, but there are a lot of implications. There are tax implications, and there are also implications that anyone suing me while I'm holding $1 billion could be able to seize part of those funds and try to get a larger piece of the cake. So that was definitely not the way to go.
But the fact of the redemptions being in Bitcoin was something that was definitely up in the air because an option was just liquidate everything, make it more simple, even though it's not the best investment, if you will, for the creditors. And that could have been the outcome. There could have been a whole bunch of Bitcoin that just got sold on the open market by the trustee, pay out the creditors, and then the rest goes back to shareholders in essentially a profit because it's Chapter 11, not Chapter 7.
Yeah, I mean, because it's Chapter 7, but basically because the bankrupt company turned out to have more assets than liabilities.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I mean, that was not going to be a good thing for anyone. And having 200,000 Bitcoin sold on the market would have had a very bad impact on the price. I would have been receiving money, but at the same time, everyone would hate me even more. I could try to distribute it, but then anyone suing me might have been able to get some piece of it before I could distribute it. And it would have been even a worse of a headache. Plus, as part of the income tax I would need to pay on this kind of amounts, I guess about 15%, wouldn't go to creditors. But some people may not like it and may want to sue me for whatever amount I would have to pay in personal taxes for receiving these kind of amounts. I mean, it's an endless nightmare. And that's one of the reasons why I talk with creditors. And I mean, listen, guys, we need to find, the way things are right now are not good. The lawyers are saying if we go back to civil rehabilitation, we have a chance to distribute bitcoins as bitcoins. This whole issue disappears. And that's what happened because a group of creditors filed with the court to move back the liquidation to civil rehabilitation. The court appointed someone to look into it. That person said it should be okay to go back to a civil rehabilitation, but we need to make sure the situation doesn't get worse for creditors. So the trustee needs to sell bitcoins to ensure at least the amount people would have received under the bankruptcy. So there are about $500 million liabilities under bankruptcy. So the trustee sold about 50,000 bitcoins, which allowed the trustee to collect the kind of amount that was needed. This amount was put into a trust. And thanks to that, we're back into a civil rehabilitation. And even if tomorrow Bitcoin price drops to zero, Gox creditors will still be able to receive from this trust the kind of amounts they were expecting initially into bankruptcy. So they cannot get a worse deal from the decision to move from liquidation back to civil rehabilitation.
So there is an opportunity, I think, with the FTX bankruptcy, perhaps not to the same degree because they didn't own any Bitcoin. The things they own are different, but they do have like these volatile assets that somewhere in that basket of companies are owned. A lot of Solana, a lot of things on the FTX venture side or Alameda venture side, whatever. And some of those may have a lot of future value. So there'll be a lot of decisions to make in terms of what do you do and how do you approach it? And I just wonder, is there going to be some kind of investment strategy as a piece of that? Or is it going to be this liquidation sale and people end up getting pennies on the dollar? But had there been an ability to distribute in kind or something, that there could be this kind of upside call essentially for those creditors. Sounds like that was relatively unique to y'all's situation though, because so many of the assets were Bitcoin specifically, and they got tied up for so long. Whereas in this situation, it's a much broader basket of assets, and it seems like liquidation is going to be more likely, at least for most of it.
Yeah, I think so too, because there's too many assets to try to get the distribution back to creditors as those assets in a fair way. For creditors that are in companies that can get back afloat or that can be sold, there might be a chance for all the assets to come back to the creditors. I'm thinking, for example, with FTX in Japan, it could be sold, I don't know, to another exchange, or the exchange could rename the company and resume activity in Japan, where everyone gets back their balance. But if this is not possible, it's unlikely to be an option to just distribute different kind of assets to people. So in that case, those assets will need to be sold and liquidated, and then distribution will happen as US dollars, most likely.
Yeah, there were quite a few other entities, and some of them got yanked out as well in like amended bankruptcy filings. Was it Ember or something like that? It was an acquisition that I think FTX US made that was worth quite a lot of money. And there's some kind of portfolio or like regulatory, things that they had available and that carried value. And it's just this weird mix of assets, and trying to figure out how all that's going to blend out. It seems like it's just going to take a lot of time. And it doesn't seem like it's as good of a scenario as Mt. Gox was in terms of turning into like a forced total and you actually make money out of it where you wouldn't have expected to. It doesn't seem like that.
To say at this point, but it sounds unlikely to get something like what happened with Mt. Gox. So
Yeah,
Very
I don't
like,
think Serum tokens are going to go up in value, Ledger.
Well, there's a lot of other stuff in there. There's, I mean,
Maps, Oxy, Feeder. There's loads.
yeah. I don't know. Solana and other like equity positions, I think that they had that across the spectrum. I mean, they invested in almost everything. So it's like this slice of the pie of global crypto market cap for whatever survives.
Yeah, just if we want to sell all of this, maybe to investment banks or to whatever they can. The goal will not to be to wait until it gets more value, but to find the right timing to sell between repaying creditors and maximizing the value. So if it can be sold easily, the trustee may decide to start with the more complex assets and hoping maybe the value can increase over time. But as we get closer to the step in bankruptcy where distribution can actually happen, these kind of assets are very likely to be sold.
It's too bad the SoftBank guy got so wrecked already. He could have gotten a lot of this at a discount.
Oh man, they're so wrecked. And Tiger Global as well.
Yeah.
Tiger Global's losing an amazing amount of money.
Yeah.
Did you say earlier that the one fees address was is it 80,000 Bitcoin in the one fees address? It was hacked before you received the exchange from Jed.
Yes.
So isn't the one fees address also the address that Craig Wright says he has a legal claim on, and it's one of the Satoshi addresses or something?
Yeah, it's indeed one of the address Fektoshi has been used.
So you're on the Craig Wright is a fraud train.
Yeah, I mean, I was there back in the time, and I know most of the very large Mongox accounts and customers. I know actually this guy wasn't there back in the time, and he claims he was there, and he has claimed like he bought those bitcoins from someone over the mark. I mean, very weird claims of buying bitcoins but just receiving private keys and not moving the bitcoins after receiving the private keys. It makes absolutely no sense. So based on my experience, on my knowledge of how all this works, I can say that it's my professional opinion that Craig is a fraud.
So his claim is that he bought that private key but didn't move the coins from the private key. I don't even understand what his claim is.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense, but he says that it was kind of a loan or something like that, where he bought this and got the private key before or something like that. And quite frankly, it makes no sense. That's something actually that's used by a lot of fraudsters, is to try to create claims that cannot be easily verified. And this way you can just run with it longer.
I've seen a couple of people in the chat say, did you feel deceived by Jed? Do you think he gave the exchange to you in bad faith, like knowing that there was problems, or do you think he stole the bitcoins? like just some questions about your relationship with Jed, I guess, from people watching.
Actually, I didn't have much contact with Jed after taking over Mongox. I had some employees handling shareholders communication and so on. And when Mongox went into bankruptcy, I didn't hear from him at all. So yeah, at the very beginning, we made the contract for the sale of Mongox in early of February, I think February the 3rd. And I didn't log into the server until actually Jed contacted me on Skype and told me, we're missing 80,000 because can you look into it? And he gave me access to the server at the time. So I kind of came here and I had this contract, which also had a specific clause that Jed would have to be kept immune for any kind of liabilities, claims, and so on from running Mongox. We had like this 80,000 bitcoins missing. And at the time, I didn't really have time to think about the reason and so on why. And from the next 3 months, I found out that there was a lot of issues with Mongox, where initially Jed told me that, yes, at some point, actually, Mongox also had theft of $50,000 on Liberty Reserve. But that was a bug that was solved, and Jed said he was fairly confident there were no other security issues with Mongox. And I took this representation at face value, which in retrospect I shouldn't have. But yeah, the main issue I had at the time was dealing with all the trouble coming with Mongox. The way the system was made was not really scalable. I had actually to fix a lot of issues every single day until in June we had another very big hack, and I had to turn everything offline. I took a couple of weeks at the time to recreate and rebuild everything. But I'm not able to comment on did Jed have knowledge of this kind of issues specifically, or did he do anything bad at all? And anyway, it's been so long, I don't think anyway there could be anything be brought on this. But what I did see with Mongox is way it was coded was not great. I had to just wipe everything at some point because of how bad it was. But there was potential in the way it was built on the ID. The fact, I mean, Mongox did grow to be the largest Bitcoin chain for a long time after that. There was just a lot of things I didn't know back in the day when I took over Mongox and I did the contract with Jed. I didn't have any lawyers to look after the contract and so on. And I'm pretty sure a lawyer wouldn't have let me sign this as is.
Yeah, so he was, from the moment you signed the contract, he had like indemnity for anything to do with Mt. Gox in the future, just past liability 100% to you. Interesting. Ledger's pulling up his picture now, like he's with his net worth.
Has anybody dumped on absolutely everyone else more than Jed McCaleb? I mean, between like letting go of liability for Mt. Gox, and then he sold like all of this XRP over 8 years and came out with billions.
Maybe actually as a way to look into the future, because he's been doing moves that turned out afterward to be very profitable for him.
It's not even counting like all. I mean, that's not. It's just two things. You know, it's Stellar, and who knows what else he's worked on. I can't even remember. But
maybe I mean, he was Chef Nami.
Yeah, back in the day, it was best known for eDonkey 2000, the peer-to-peer file sharing application. And went from that to Mongox, to Ripple, to Stellar. I don't know what he's doing now.
The another thing that keeps coming up in comments is I think maybe I knew about this, but I forgot about it. For a while, you were accused of being Dread Pirate Roberts. And they said that you were running Silk Road. Was this before DPR went to jail, or was it? I guess it must have been before that. It
was during DPR's trial. So during the trial, his lawyers tried to use the argument that nobody could say for sure who DPR was. The way they did this was to, yes, the US government for a while did think that I was DPR and actually investigated me. And I did learn actually from that during more than a year, all my emails and everything was read by the US law enforcement.
Because they thought you were DPR, so they were just investigating you for a year, I guess.
Yeah, they thought I could be DPR because, I mean, running Mongox on Silk Road at the same time made sense. Like, you create an exchange and then you create a need for the exchange. And it's perfect. Turned out that
all right, so it was Jed. It was Jed. We found him.
Yeah. But actually, there are different things happening. As I said, I was doing a hosting company, and I was the first company accepting Bitcoin payments. Ross Ulbricht actually saw this about a domain, silkroadmarket.org, and he put a simple web page explaining how to get to the dark web and accessing Silk Road on it. So when US law enforcement looked into Silk Road and they saw this Silk Road domain, and they saw it was handled by my company, they said, "Oh yeah, it's the guy, definitely."
Wait, so who registered that domain?
The domain actually was registered anonymously on my platform using Bitcoins as payment.
Oh, I see. Oh God. And,
So yeah,
with
same
all the like corruption that was going on at the time with the secret
Yeah.
service agent and the DEA agent, do you think Ross was treated fairly? Because at the time of the trial, there was all this stuff about this murder for hire charge, and then it came out that actually multiple people could have written those logs because people had access to like the Silk Road admin system, including these corrupt agents who were trying to launder money through Mt. Gox. Do you think that justice is there? Do you think he should be a free man today? Do you think it's somewhere in the middle?
If I had to say on this, he would be free. I don't think he was treated fairly, but he was treated very harshly as an example because it was the first case of this kind where you have a darknet exchange on Tor using bitcoins to facilitate illegal transactions. And for the US, the goal was really to show that if you do that, things are not going to be nice for you. It's very unfortunate for him because, I mean, we're not very far in terms of ages, or from what I hear, he had some ideas, political ideas and so on that he tried to make real with Silk Road. And he may have been trying like for hiring people for murders and so on, doing things like that that went way too far in terms of what was done. But there was no evidence that anyone actually died on this. I don't know exactly how much of this went through in the end, but at least in terms of evidence, he was charged for running Silk Road and only this, and they decided to put him in jail for life. I don't remember exactly how many lifetimes of jail he's got.
Yeah, I think it's several.
Yes.
Do you think,
yeah, the person who was the target of the murder for hire contract testified in favor of Ross in the end. And yeah, no one died.
Do you think it's likely that there were, at the time that you were active with Mt. Gox, and it was kind of the largest target, and that there are now state level actors that are trying to hamstring the crypto industry or view it as some form of threat to the fiat monetary system, to the degree that to which they would, try to create chaos in the ecosystem?
Well, there are definitely people inside governments that think like that. Quite often, when you think about government, sometimes you have like people who think that the government actually has a background side with people ready to act under the shadows to do specific things and so on. But typically, governments actually turns out to be a lot more different people with different opinions doing different things at the same time. And you don't really have a united front for many of the actions governments will take. But there are definitely people in different countries that are not enjoying crypto scene and how things are moving forward here, trying with whatever authority they have to make things harder for crypto or just doing things like that. So there are definitely people like that. I don't think any large government is doing a united front against crypto. I didn't see anything like this so far, at least. Like trying to do things in the background to make things worse or do things like that. But there are definitely people who don't like it, and there are also people who like crypto very much and trying to use their authority to bring more things to crypto. There also been some talks about what FTX has been doing talks with the SEC on how they've been trying to block DeFi in the US and so on. I don't know how far all of this is true or not, but it makes sense that people inside governments will try to make things go their way, either because they have a profit from it or because they believe crypto is a tool used by hackers or even North Korea to try to raise money to prepare for war, stuff like this. So governments typically involve lots of people. Each of them have their own opinions, and they just act the way they want to act generally.
When all the Mt. Gox stuff like came out, did you end up with you ended up going to jail? Was it about a year? You spent a year in jail?
Actually, I was in a pre-trial detention. Yeah, so I was arrested in 2015 on August the 1st. The goal was, okay, this guy stole all the Bitcoins, we're going to get him to confess. A very typical process in Japan. When they arrested me and starting to question me, look into my computer and so on, they saw that I didn't do what they thought I did with the Bitcoins. They actually had this two-pronged approach where one side was, okay, you stole the Bitcoins, you did something bad with the accounting, we have records showing it. And the other side was, you embezzled customers' money. So the approach for the second side about the embezzlement, which actually was the main thing they had after the theft of Bitcoins, was fairly simple on paper. Is for the last year of Mt. Gox, they had numbers that said Mt. Gox had $12 million in revenue and $60 million of money spent, which means that Mt. Gox spent more than it earned, which means Mt. Gox spent customers' money equal embezzlement. That was very simple. It turned out actually to be wrong because they didn't get the right accounting figures, mostly because actually Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy 1 month before the end of the financial year, and the last year of accounting was not finalized. So the trustee just, it's not going to be any kind of taxes or anything for a bankrupt company. So the accounting was just closed as is. Many of the actions taken by Mt. Gox during the final time were not accounted for. So while I was in detention pending trial, my lawyers tried to get the prosecution documents. It took 6 months before I actually got all the documentation of what I was accused of.
This detention's not like in your home, right? It's in isolation.
Yes. I was in, actually I spent the first 4 months and a half at a police station, which is a sort of process in Japan. So I would be interrogated every single day and spend about 8 hours interrogated a day, 7 days a week. And after they were done with that, they sent me to the Tokyo Data Center, where I was put into a small room alone and just waiting for something to happen. And actually it turned out to be not the best experience because you're here, you're alone, you don't have anyone to talk to, and you don't know what's going to happen when anything is going to happen. So I was waiting, and my lawyers got the documents. So inside the room in the Tokyo Data Center, I had about 20,000 to 30,000 pages of legal documents, including 20,000 pages of accounting for Mt. Gox. And I thought the prosecution argument was weird because I knew we had more sales. And I wanted to find evidence of it. So I started looking at the accounting. And while I didn't have any computer, mobile phone, or anything, I did manage to buy a calculator, which actually is a specific exclusion, like in the Tokyo Data Center. If you are arrested on something financial, you may be able to buy a calculator. It's not written anywhere, but I managed to find this. I spent, I think, 3-4 weeks going through all of the accounting and recomputing everything, and I found about $5.5 million of revenue. The prosecution didn't count. It was enough to invalidate the argument because then it means Mt. Gox had more revenue than spending, and of course, then the whole argument just falls together. I put all of this on paper, sent it to my lawyers. My lawyers brought it to the prosecution. Actually, the prosecution person changed in April because there's a lot of movements in April in Japan. It's typically when people get to new position in companies and so on. So we had new prosecutors in April that started to look into this. I had meeting with the prosecution where I explained, yes, this is the accounting for Mt. Gox and so on. The prosecution found it was kind of difficult for them to continue on this. So they went through a process which exists under Japanese law where they can add new charges before the trial. They accuse me of embezzling not customers' money, but companies' money, which kind of still could be difficult because I was the only person in charge that could decide to spend money, being the sole voting rights shareholders and the sole director. If I decide to spend money on behalf of Mongox and it's not customers' money, it's not really a crime anymore. It's much more difficult to show it as a crime. So prosecution was not ready to move on with the case yet. The judge told them, okay, if it's going to take longer, just get him out on bail and you can do your case while he's out on bail. So that what finally triggered the prosecution, like the case was not holding anything and they were not ready to go to trial, so they wanted more time. And I mean, when you're a foreigner in Japan, it's very difficult to be freed on bail. It's not something that happens quite often. You only have a few very high-profile cases that got things like that. Like later, you've got Carlos Ghosn, the Nissan director that actually ran away while on bail. So that's a whole other story. Actually involved in that one too. So if you want, I can tell too. I can talk about this maybe another time.
Wait, you were involved in that?
Yeah, I met Carlos Ghosn before he left Japan because he wanted to meet me to talk about how I got my verdict. Because in the end, I was found innocent of all the embezzlement and everything.
These folks, they ran off.
I actually told Carlos Ghosn that in Japan, it's difficult to get a non-guilty verdict, but it's possible. I'm the proof of it. You just need to be ready to fight for many, many years. Based on what he told to journalists after that actually convinced him to leave Japan because he didn't want to fight for many years.
You know, this has
Oh my God.
been a relatively common story worldwide where someone in crypto is detained or put in something like this where there's no formal charges filed. The latest is the Tornado Cash developers arrest in the Netherlands, and then recently extension for yet another 90 days without charges. And I think this is a kind of scary reality of all of this, where you have someone who, in your case, was cleared to where they at least could not bring any charges, yet you were in detention for months in isolation, and something that you said it wasn't jail, but it sounded a heck of a lot like jail to me, just not from a criminal punishment perspective. It's like hey, in case we get to charge you for this later, we're going to hold you here now. There's not any recourse in that for you? Like,
I mean, the only recourse is when you are in there, you can try to apply for bail, and I did apply a few times, but each time I was
you could barely get a calculator. Like,
yeah, I think it should be actually nearby. Oh yeah,
You still have the calculator. You could sell that as an NFT for $1 million.
Yeah.
If it was a year ago.
Because I'm never buying a calculator. I've got a computer, I've got stuff, so I don't need to buy a calculator. And I'm not. But it's a very simple one. Like the addition, subtraction. It cost
that was
me
your only friend for several months.
Yeah, it was my friend for quite some time too.
The thing that I find remarkable is that you had to do the reaccounting by yourself. You would hope that like someone was out there doing that for you, but you were just sat in a cell.
Yeah, I didn't really have the cash to hire people. I was lucky to have lawyers that helped me actually pro bono for the most part. So it was a very difficult situation. I was bankrupt because actually the Mongox bankruptcy filed for bankruptcy against me too, while I was after I was arrested. So I didn't have anything, and I needed to at least fight and try to prove that no, I'm arrested for. Initially, they thought I was doing something with the bitcoins. I don't have any bitcoins. Then I thought, okay, you took customers' money. No, I didn't take customers' money. That's something I wanted, and I really had to prove. In order to prove something like this, when you have 20,000 pages of accounting, typically you want this into an accounting software and just type queries and you get results. But I didn't get the chance to do that, so the only option I had remaining was this calculator.
Wow, 20,000 pages in a little calculator.
But
Anyway, go on,
yeah,
sorry.
the only good thing in that is I had all the time in the world. Actually, when you're found guilty and you're sent to the guilty people's jail, you have work you can do every day. So, I mean, you're forced to do work every day. So time goes much faster. But when you're pre-trial, because you're supposedly
in
innocent,
isolation.
Isolation, because I was VIP. So I was kind of, there were like 20, 30 other people like this on the floor. Most of them are actually death row inmates. Because in Japan, when you are on death row or when you are pending trial, you're in the same situation of waiting for judgment. So I was there. It was a very quiet floor, of course, because nobody's talking. You don't have anything to do. So I had some books with me, which helped me spend a little bit of time. I also tried to spend time writing novels. But in this kind of environment, actually, all the stuff I write is crap. I don't want anyone to look at it. And when I finally had something to read, it was more than 20,000 pages of accounting and also all of the testimony from the different people the police and the prosecution talked to. So I did go through every single page of everything because it was a good way to kill time. But also it was the only way I could defend myself.
I asked this question originally because I wanted to ask, does Sam go to jail in your opinion?
I would say it's like 90% likely.
Do you reckon he gets like a Elizabeth Holmes type sentence?
11 years or 15 or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, 11 years. She's probably going to get a little bit less based on time served and so on, or good behavior, typical thing. But I would guess it makes sense for this kind of crime. I mean, he didn't kill anyone. The only thing is there's a lot of media attention, but it's the same kind of thing. But because of the media attention, he's not likely to get scot-free because people would just accept it. But he's probably going to get some kind of sentence that makes sense. Just enough so people are not too angry, but not too much either because, you know, he's got good friends.
Yeah. All right, I only have a couple of questions left. Ledger, do you want anything on your mental list? I know you don't make a real list.
I just continue to be kind of sad.
In life? Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. No, just at the like disparity of like global justice systems and who's trying, like, we're supposedly protecting versus who we actually are. And like, Mark, I don't know your whole story. I don't know what you're actually guilty of from a negligence perspective or whatever in the earlier days prior to the collapse, but post collapse, it seems like you had opportunities to take an easy road where you didn't take that easier road, and where you were trying to advocate for the people who were affected by your exchange failing. And I think that there's a lot of credit to be had there. And yet at the same time, you see like nobody charged you with a crime, or certainly were not convicted of a crime. And yet you've been kind of like guilty in the court of public opinion for a very long time, which I think is quite a sentence served, in addition to this isolation that you were in, that a government didn't even have anything to bring against you. And I think that it just kind of makes me sick for the system. And now we're looking at what we see in this current era of crypto, where there appear to be some fairly clear examples of fraud, at least again in the court of public opinion. Maybe we're wrong, maybe we don't understand, but like, where is justice being served now? And what does that look like? I think everyone does deserve their day in court, but like we've seen some stuff where it's like the likelihood of a crime seems quite high. So where are we going to actually do our jobs, like as like these people, these enforcers, if you will, going to do their jobs to protect customers? It's kind of insane to me that things worked out the way they did for Mt. Gox. I think it's a huge blessing, honestly, when you look at how long it was locked up. Some of these people got better outcomes than they possibly could have had. I'm afraid that we're not going to have that this time around. This is more of a monologue, Cobie, than a question.
I noticed, yeah.
I guess if I'm going to summarize with a question, I would ask, like, what do you hope can happen here that would be a best case outcome for the people who've truly been affected? Like, forget the funds and forget the, corporate interests. And what about the individual investor interests? What do you think is the best possible outcome?
The first thing that we need, I'm guessing you're talking about, of course, FTX, but the first thing that's really required here is transparency, because we are learning bits by bits from the court filings, the Wright investigation into what happened with FTX, that we hear that, for example, there were so many companies. We hear that money was stolen from FTX right after the filing for bankruptcy, but maybe it was not a hack. Maybe it was actually the Bahamas government making a seizure. But then why would they sell it and make losses, converting it to Ethereum or whatever? So there's a lot of things that are happening even today that we don't know, that are very relevant to every single person involved with FTX. I mean, it's very possible that some screwed up and thought that he could recoup the losses from his Alameda experience, and decided, like this year, to move some of the customer funds to Alameda to just keep the thing alive and just make things go up again. That it didn't work out, which would be potentially a crime. But what's important is to know what happened. We can decide if it's a crime or not. We can go through all of things. But right now, what's really missing is a full picture of everything. The Bahamas government is trying to do something. We don't know who is rooting for whom. We've seen some, I don't know exactly where he's trying to go, where, I mean, he posted his long what happened on Twitter, and then tried to not say what happened, but what he was trying to do. And there's many things there that we don't know at all. And before we can get back people their money, which is in the end what everyone wants to have, I believe people need to have access to the truth and the whole truth of everything that's happening around FTX, because maybe you're not going to get money back out of your investment. Maybe you're going to get only 10 cents on the dollar, or maybe you're going to get that out of your money. We don't know yet. But in order for people to get some kind of closure on this, what's important is to know why things went like this. And I mean, if you're involved in this, you need to know what went wrong so you know how to avoid it in the future. It's part of the learning process we go through as humans, and we go through as a industry with crypto. And it's really, I think, the most important thing. People getting money back or not will depend, of course, on what really remains. So it's not going to change much on what we do, but we can try to find a way to get things done with more transparency. I mean, it's already part of what the bankruptcy is about, because you've got the court filing that everyone has access to and so on, which brings a lot of transparency on the process. But I do feel that there are pieces of information missing out there. I mean, we know that I've talked a few times about it, like this cash account for $8 billion that frankly is quite suspicious. You have this corporate structure, which is very complex, and we don't know if there's anything hidden behind it. We don't know all of the companies that had investment into FTX. Actually, if you look into the filings that happened yesterday, you have a list of creditors. You don't have the names, but you have the amounts. And you can see that the top 50 creditors in FTX are like $200 million, $150 million. And very large amount of money that FTX owes to people, which means that some companies out there have holds of this kind of amounts, and we don't know which companies have been affected or this kind of information. So there's a lot of things that needs to be more transparent as an industry. We created crypto. Satoshi created Bitcoin initially as a way to create a system that has a fully transparent history of every single transaction, where you can choose to be pseudonymous, so you can hide your name, but you cannot hide your transaction history. And I think it's kind of a philosophy that actually brings different results than the typical way we do things in the business world. So yeah, if I had really anything I wanted to see right now from FTX, Sam, and all the people involved is transparency, no lies.
That's
Let's see what
that's a scary point about somebody out there, or hopefully has like the logs of what the balances on FTX were, and therefore what other exchanges, hedge funds, projects have holes in their own balance sheets now and aren't coming forward. So there's this delta between what someone knows if they have access to that information, plus the projects themselves, versus what's public in the public eye, and therefore there's probably a good bit of contagion and fallout left.
Yeah, I think nobody wants contagion to happen. So if a project, for example, out there has $150 million hole due to FTX, it's not really their fault, and it might be worth coming forward to the community and find a way to work out things on the long term and making sure less company fall from this. So I'm just trying to hide it, and or maybe, if they can, if it's not an important hole, like they got enough cash to cover for it, it might be okay. But if anyone is in trouble because of that, I'm pretty sure as a community we can find a way to help these kind of companies move forward this and stay alive.
When you mentioned the what happened tweets, I was thinking, like, what sort of mind state is a person, or what kind of person tweets what happened letter by letter over the course of like 3 days. But then recently I found out that that BlockFi gave a loan to someone who gave a loan to Alameda, who gave a loan to Sam's private company, with which he bought Robinhood equity, and then pledged that as collateral at BlockFi to get a loan.
Pretty reasonable.
Who knows? Yeah, that's the kind of person. All right, I got a couple of questions before we wrap up. One, did you ever interact with Satoshi, and or
do you know who it is?
Who would your bet be on who she is?
So yeah, actually I did have some interactions back in the day on the Bitcoin forums, because back then the Bitcoin client was using something called WXGTK, which is a very weird and not fairly, lots of people use it, but I liked Qt better as a graphic framework. Sorry, it's a lot of tech talk, but basically I wanted to make my own Bitcoin client, and Satoshi was against it because it could risk derailing the blockchain. I had a little discussion about this with him or her, I don't know. And as to who Satoshi is, I don't think we should be looking into it, because as part of the Bitcoin community and crypto enthusiasts and so on, Satoshi made very clear when leaving the Bitcoin world that nobody, don't want to be revealed. As someone who has been involved in the Bitcoin community, and I guess anyone who uses anything based even remotely on blockchains should respect this opinion, this decision from Satoshi.
All right, so but you're not telling us. Got it. Question number 2: was Willy bot real?
You could say it was real. It is not exactly as people have deduced exactly, while for the most part it was similar. There have been a long history on this, and it starts actually from before I took over Mongox. And it was probably one of the main things I regretted after taking over Mongox is when we had this 80,000 Bitcoins hole, how to deal with it. I did get some advice from Jed, which he suggested either to get an investor to bring this kind of amount on the table and make everything back to normal, or just wait for the sales to cover this hole, or just, if the price of Bitcoin starts to going up and the hole becomes bigger, maybe cover some of this hole by creating a US dollar hole that might be more stable over time. Part of what Willybot was doing is to basically avoid this 80,000 Bitcoins hole from increasing in value by replacing it with a US dollar hole.
Yeah, so buying back the Bitcoins and then you have missing USD instead of missing Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Makes
actually the way I should have done this back in the time, and I would have done knowing what I know today, is just to be open with it and explain to customers, okay, we have this theft, we have this hole, we're going to issue token that matches the hole and so on to people.
You think Bitfinex did it right?
I think, in retrospect and looking how it went through, it was the right solution, yes. It at least everything and every single exchange out there is the one that got the better resolution.
Is it weird thinking about like one Bitcoin as a whole lot of money when you were slinging thousands of Bitcoin around, like servers that were just barely hanging on at the time?
Sorry? I didn't.
Is it weird thinking about one Bitcoin as a lot of money when you were dealing with an exchange where thousands of Bitcoin are just things that you dealt with every day?
Yeah, when I was selling servers with my hosting company back in the day, you could get one server for about 2,000 Bitcoins a month. That would be insane today. Actually, I think I made like 70,000 Bitcoins out of all the web hosting activity, which was not to Mongox. And because of my position with Mongox, the trustee decided to not let me or the company claim anything out of this.
Wow.
Yeah. Did you ever plan to put Litecoin on Mt. Gox, or was it all a ruse?
It was planned to. I was very busy dealing with US government seizing funds from Hong Kong. That was France, which was quite a pain. Plus, we had the CoinLab lawsuit. Every single day was a lot of things to deal with. And I did, Mongox did have things prepared for Litecoin implementation. But there were a lot of changes still required in terms of UI and how to make this work. Mongox also had an automatic intercurrency settlement system where, for example, if you were buying Bitcoins in euro and there was something cheaper, even with exchange rate from the US dollar market, you would get your trade settled against the US dollar trade of someone else. So we had a fairly complex system back in the time, and hiding Litecoin would actually multiply this complexity, not just by 2, but a lot more. So I had to think of dealing with this, while at the same time the Mongox trading engine had trouble going through all the trades in real time. So we had the engine lag everyone likes to make fun of. But that was also something I was working on with the team back in the day, where we had a new trading settlement engine where actually we split the actual trade execution and the actual movement of funds. So we can trade very quickly. And for example, you could buy Bitcoins very quickly, but your balance could be updated a few seconds later.
Was this Midas?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That was the Midas engine, where we basically you want to buy Bitcoin, so you get your funds locked into a trade, and the trade is executed, but your coins are not moved instantly. And this allowed us to offer very quick execution. And I mean, we reached like a few 100,000 transactions per second from that. So that would have been nice. I mean, we had a lot of good stuff on the work if Mt. Gox was still there.
Cobie, would you trade on an exchange called Mt. Gox today? Like if it, after the bankruptcy and all that stuff got finished?
Well, I fell for that with MintPal too, because MintPal was pretty good, and then they got I think they got hacked, and then someone came in to like buy MintPal and make them whole, but actually they just stole all the money and then went to jail for raping people, not even related to the financial fraud, just a rapist. So I fell for that one once before. So I don't know about it. I think with stuff like that, it's like in some ways they're like real deep crypto native people, like it's like, oh, redemption, it's the Phoenix, you know. And then but for everyone else it's like, wait, didn't that like die 10 years ago? Like that doesn't sound safe to me. So I don't know. But do you miss it? Do you wish that like Mt. Gox was still operate as an exchange today, and you were, you know, competing with CZ and SBF and launching exchange tokens and leveraging customer deposits against those exchange tokens and shit? Or
who would you be?
Yeah, I don't know actually, because it's a lot of stress running an exchange, and when you have like hundreds of thousands of bitcoins on a system that you don't know, tomorrow you could get hacked and lose everything. Every single day is like could be the last day of your life, basically. And there's one thing after the Mt. Gox bankruptcy is, and maybe some people will draw. I mean, will feel like they already had someone say that, but you do sleep better when everything is at stake every single day.
Yeah. On that note, Ledger, 2 hours in. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us.
I have one like very quick.
Okay, we're
question.
not done. He's still got questions.
Mark, can you
he's reading it from somewhere.
Can you tell us once and for all, what were you thinking in this moment?
Actually, on this picture, I believe it was during the press conference when we announced the bankruptcy, and I was actually very, very stressed because I was in front of this. I mean, this very small room where you had me, the lawyers on one side, and more than 100 journalists, cameramen, and different kind of people in front of me. And in that time, they were still playing nice, but that was probably the most stressful time in declaring bankruptcy, because I didn't know at the time what I was going to go through. Actually, when I did Bo and going through like explaining, yes, we had an issue with the system and we lost everything, and I'm very sorry for everyone involved. I actually, while I was doing Robo, I was trying to remember the actual words, and I said in very weakly in Japanese, like, what was the thing already? And it turned out that when I was doing that, some of the journalists turned the volume so high that you could actually hear me, like, what was I trying to say? And that was kind of not what I wanted people to hear, but
so this face of euphoria is actually a face of extreme stress and work anxiety.
I think this picture was taken while I was blinking or something like that, because I was not clearly not euphoric, and
I feel like we can rewrite this picture though now.
In this moment, I am fucked.
In this moment, I am shitting myself. Basically.
Oh man. All right. Well, I had to know. Thank you for reliving it for me. I've really appreciated your input today, and I hope that it's helpful for other people. Is there any final words that you want to leave us or Sam or the bankruptcy trustees or whoever?
Yeah, I mean, one thing would be, I guess, as a community, and even it might be preposterous for me to say this, but I do think that a lot of people inside the crypto community are really happy to help other people when they have issues or going through trouble and so on. And it's really a matter of being open and asking for help. But on one side, being more open is a good thing. On the other side, for FTX, for some, at least as the way things look like right now, it looks like it something that would be typically considered criminal. So it might be actually a good idea to not talk about it too much without lawyers. But yeah,
Sam, don't listen to Mark. Come on the podcast, have a chat with us, mate. You can confess all you want.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you so much. Appreciate you being on here with us. Y'all can follow Mark at Magical Tux on the internet. Thanks for everybody for being here. We've got another show for you
Peace.
this Thursday. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.